So excited to be back because you guys have just done some amazing things in Google Classroom already. It's been really fun to watch what you're doing and watch your assignments and stuff roll in. Couple things. You had put in a lot of questions yesterday, which is great in the kind of post survey. So let's look at those real quick, and then we will go through kind of some content for today. So if you have anything else, go ahead and drop it in the chat or unmute and say something. So, all right. So yesterday's questions, there was my favorite, and I'm glad somebody asked this one because I was trying to figure it out myself, but I had not looked it up yet, is that how do I move the gray shade over the header that I created? Would you believe that that's a feature? Yeah, that's what I said too. So it is a feature that they are getting rid of, but they put the gray shade on for readability because they want this white lettering to show up. One of the nice things is it was a really long conversation in the forum, and at the end of May, an engineer from Google said, there's been enough comments on this. This has been elevated, and so they're going to do something about it. What, I don't know, but hopefully the gray shade will go away. So that makes perfectly good sense. I mean, because I was like, oh my gosh, I kept changing colors and it was just not fun. So I hear you, but you can. So hopefully the gray shade will be going away. So great question. Is there a way to see what the student sees without logging in with another email? No. Sorry, guys. There isn't. Unfortunately, the only way that you can see the student view is to be a student. And so I'm really giddy that you can log in, you can add yourself as a student and you can actually see what it looks like without having to either hope you have your own student in the house or partner with a colleague. I mean, not that partnering with a colleague is bad, and I like to do that too, but sometimes you don't have a colleague when you're working. So unfortunately, at this point, no, there is not a student view unless you are logged in with another email. So that mark is done comes into play when you do not have something to attach to the homework. And so this is me as a student. And so if I go down and look at this assignment, this very first assignment, remember we didn't, I just had you guys go in and edit the slides. And so you had everybody edited the same slides, but I want to know when you're done with it. And so there's the mark is done. If I add or create something, so if I make a Google Docs and drop it in here, now I'm going to see that turn in option. And so that's the big difference there. The other difference where you see the turn in is when we do the custom header. If I go in and view that assignment, this was one that I had made. Let's
What's up?
All right, I did mute you guys, so you can unmute if you need to. This assignment I made when it was created, everybody got their own copy. And so when you push that out, turn in will be the option that shows up. And so two differences there. And then, so what does an ungraded assignment look like? Today, this working with littles in Google Classroom is really put together for the those teachers that are working with early, with the elementary peeps. This one is, there's no grade attached to it. But I can't tell that as a student. I can't see that. I still have the mark is done because I didn't attach a file. I'm going to switch over to me as a teacher. When I look at my grades and I look at that assignment, you'll see that that assignment, that working with littles in Google Classroom, under the class average, there is an NA there. And so that tells me that there is no grade attached to that class. I said that was a non-graded assignment. So that's kind of the difference. So I'm glad you asked that question also, because that was a really great, kind of way to look at the differences and how it looks to the student. And I think that is one of the things that's really important, is that we have a decent understanding of how it looks as a student and how it feels to be a student, because then as you go through, you'll be able to have more empathy with those guys as we do this. And then the last question that was dropped in was how do you comment on a document shared with you? Great question. And so I'm going to pop back over to me as a teacher, and we're going to look at the very first assignment, because that was that shared Google Slides. And so if I go in and look at the assignment and go to the slides, one of the really great things here now is I can go down to a slide, and then you're going to see in the top right, you have share, present, and then open comment history. And so here I can see all the comments, and then I can click on comment and go ahead and add a comment, and I can say, oh, I can just say, a great organizational system, and comment. And the nice thing here now is you'll notice that over on slide 2 on the left hand side of the page, you can see that there is a comment there. When you are commenting on a document that you own, you will actually get notifications on that. So like if students are commenting back and forth on each other's documents, you should get notifications on those comments just through Google Docs. So that answers all the questions that were dropped in the chat. Do you guys have other questions that from yesterday or today as we move forward before we go? You guys are so quiet. Nothing? All right. So let's go ahead and do a real quick look at today. So for today, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, kind of go over again that we covered really quickly yesterday. And then we are going to dive into some of the questions from yesterday and look at some of those other features. So We're going to look at quizzes and forms today so that you have the options to see how they can be used and ways that you can use them. We're going to play around with the rubrics a little bit so you can see how those work. And those are brand new. So, I mean, that's kind of exciting. I mean, they just became moved out of beta in January last year, or January of 2020. So that's kind of cool. And then finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time with Google Slides and how can we collaborate, create, etc. with Google Slides. I do want to touch a little bit more. I'm going to go back to yesterday and talk a little bit about Google Drive. And so you guys did a really great job of sharing links. So you got your links, and I'm not going to pick on anybody. I'm not going to click on anybody's link. But one of the things that I noticed was a lot of the times when I clicked on a link, it wasn't actually shared. It said I would have to ask for permission. Let's see, Pam, I think I did pick on you. So may I pick on you again, Pam? You can either chat me or just unmute and say yes.
No problem.
Thank you, Pam. All right. So Pam shared with me her PowerPoint. However, when I clicked on it the first time, it said I didn't have permission to do that. So Molly, I'm going to test yours and see what happens. Oh, yours worked. Good job. I'm not going to go any further. But so I had to ask Pam to share it with me. And so this is where I want to kind of go back through and look at sharing settings again and talk about sharing and make sure that we have a decent understanding of sharing within Google Slides. So in the instructions for this assignment, we talked about change the sharing settings so anyone with the link can comment. So what does that mean? So when I go to PowerPoint, and so I'm in a slides, when I click on the share button, what you're going to find is, it's slow to load. Here it goes. Okay. All right. So what you're going to find is it's shared with, these are direct people that I've shared this slide deck with. And so I could add any one of you personally if I wanted to with these slides. Whoops. And so you can type in somebody's email address and give them permission to view or edit. And so if I want to share, it can come up where they're an editor, they're a viewer, or they're a commenter. All a viewer can do is look at it. You can't do anything with it. And that's great. I mean, a lot of times I use view often. Comment is one of those things that you can't make changes, but you can add comments. And so it will look differently. And then finally, you can attach a message to this. I'm going to tell you that a lot of times, for whatever reason, when I send messages this way, sometimes they go through, sometimes they go to my spam. So just so you know, a lot of times I will also send an email to somebody to say, hey, I shared this with you. The other thing you can do is you can look in your drive. So we're going to go to my drive. I clicked on the waffle. I clicked on my drive. And we have this shared with me over on the left-hand side. And so that shared with me is, if somebody says, yeah, I shared that with you, that's a quick way to pop in and look and see if there's something there. So I'm going to go back to my sharing settings. So now, so that's what I want to share with like a couple people, or not necessarily everybody. A lot of times what I want to do is I want everybody that I'm working with to be able to view something. And so I don't necessarily want it to be, I'm just going to share it with a certain person. So here, that's where this get link comes into play. And you're going to see that you can change the link here by clicking on it, and they just changed this, and so it makes it a little bit, I think it's a little more confusing. When you come up, you have the State of South Dakota K-12 Data Center. And so this is anybody who's logged in with their K-12 email address can view, well, can right now, can view this link. I can change over here just like I did with an individual person if they're a viewer, a commenter, or an editor. And so a lot of times when you work with the K-12, in the K-12, this is what people will share their documents as. And so it comes out as, you know, State of South Dakota K-12, and you just need to be logged in with your K-12. When you're working with parents, really you're going to want anyone with the link. And so if this was my syllabus, or if this was something that I wanted to have anybody look at, parents, my colleagues, everybody, anyone with the link. And then this is also where you can change it to viewer, commenter, or editor. And so those are, you know, kind of the big differences. And so like for this, for the assignment where I asked you to, you know, make it so anybody can comment, I did say anyone with the link, and then you want them to be able to comment. And so then once you've done that, you can copy the link, say done, and you are good to go. And then you can paste that link wherever. So that is one of the, you know, that sharing, and like I said, it has changed since earlier this summer. It changed how it looks, and I think it looks a little more confusing. So questions about sharing real quick. Okay, Pam, I'm glad you asked that question. And Peter, I see your question about Grammarly, and we can come back to that. So does it matter that you use a PowerPoint rather than a Google slide format? So yes and no. It doesn't matter, especially if your students are just going to be viewing it. You'll notice at the top here, I get this option to open it with Google Slides, or, you know, it says I can connect more apps, and depending on what you've, you know, where you're at, you'll see different things. So I can open this in Google Slides if I want to. And so you'll notice that it says some PowerPoint features can't be displayed in Google Slides and will be dropped. You'll also notice that I get this, ooh, welcome to Office editing. And so I can use docs, sheets, and slides to edit and share my Office formatted files. And so that is a new thing for Google. And so when I upload something as like a PowerPoint, or a docx or an XLX, I can edit it. And so if we roll on through, you're going, it shows you up here in the, by the title, that it is, that you are viewing a file in Office format. You can save as a Google slide if you want to. And so like say you want to convert that, you can do that, but I'm going to show you an easier way. And then you can also continue to manage versions. And so if you make changes, you can manage versions just like you always did in Google Docs. So right now, this is still a PowerPoint format. However, you also see at the top that some of the PowerPoint features can't be displayed, and it's going to make changes. So like some of your shape effects are going to be removed. And I'm sure you guys have noticed presentations that people have, you've been somewhere where you're in a session and they're using Google Slides, and you can tell that they converted it from PowerPoint because like some of their backgrounds are wonky or some of their text is funny. So one of the things that happens when you bring a document over from Word, PowerPoint, or Excel into Google is you can lose some of the formatting. And so I'm going to, I'll go ahead and save this as a Google Slides. And then when we're looking at this, so now this is a Google Slides. If I was going to do this, you know, if this was, you know, like if I'm going to do a lot of converting files back and forth, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to skim through my slides and make sure that things aren't messed up too badly. Because I don't know this slide set really well, I can't tell you. Some of the images look like they might be kind of overlapping, probably not how you had them designed originally. But so this is now a Google Slides. This over here is still our PowerPoint. So how do we manage this in regular life? So we've already talked, you can use a PowerPoint if you want to, you can use Word, you can use all that. I'm going to go back to my Google Drive and I'm going to talk about a couple of things. So files. One of the things that I can do is I can bring a file in from my my computer. So let me pull over into my downloads. And this is one of my favorite things ever. So let me see if I can find a decent, okay, this one's good. All right, so I love this. I want to know how many of you guys know this. So get ready to participate in a second. So I'm going to quick upload a Word document to my Google Drive. I'm going to find it on my computer and then I'm going to drag and drop it over and it's uploading. How many of you guys knew you could do that? Go ahead and find your participants. And so go ahead and find your participants, the little people at the bottom of your screen, and then click yes or no. So did you know you can just drag and drop a file from your computer into Google Drive? Oh, you guys, it's neck and neck. This is so fun. Right now, the no's have it. Come on, yeses. All right, so it's your participants tab. So that's at the bottom of your window. It's a little people icon. And then at the bottom of that, you'll see a green check or a red X. All right, well, right now the no's have it, 20 to 10. So, so the 10, awesome. Isn't it just such a huge lifesaver to know that you can just drag and drop files over and they upload? So that is, you know, part one is you can just drag and drop a file over and it really, it is just makes life so much easier. So that's how I move files. I can do a whole folder that way if I want to. So super easy. LaDonna, you know, big thing, it probably won't be as interactive. You know, that's a great question, and I think it's going to depend on what do you mean by interactive? Do you want to unmute and chat?
Like mine, I usually use like a hyperdoc. So if I convert it over, like I just make everything in slides so that way I know everything works without having to double check everything.
Say that again.
Like I make all mine in slides now so that way when I upload everything, I don't need to worry about it not, you know, some link not working or something not looking right. Where if I convert it over, I always want to spend more time going back and looking through it to make sure everything's working.
Yes. So and truly, and that is one of the things that, I mean, I tend to do more, like if I'm going to be using Google, I create in Google. If I'm going to be using Microsoft, I create in Microsoft. I agree, but you can convert, so it is an option. So you'll notice that the file that I drug over is in this format of it's in a Google Doc. It has the Google Doc icon. So this was a Word document that I automatically had it convert to a Google Doc. How did I do that? In your settings in Google Drive, so the gear on the upper right hand corner, click on settings, and then you have an option here to convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. And so, like for example, Pam, if you would have had this on when you uploaded, it would have converted. So I'm going to turn it off so you guys can see what happens when I don't have it on, okay? So I'm going to pop back over to my downloads. And let's see, what do I want? Oops, this is my drive. These files look familiar. My Zoom settings. Oh, you guys. All right, so here's my schedule of completion, and so I'm going to drag this over, okay? I do not have convert on, and so now I'm uploading it, and when it's uploaded, you're going to see that it comes in with a different icon. That tells me that is a Word doc format. And so if I open it, it's going to open it up as the Word. And so now I can open it in real time with Word files and Google Docs, so just like we just saw with the PowerPoint. So that is nice. I mean, I don't have to make that conversion if I don't want to. And so if I'm using Word documents, I can just go through and edit it. The other thing I can do is I can save it as a Google Docs. And so once that's done, now it has the Google Docs icon. And when I close my files and I go back and look at my drive, I have one here that's a schedule of completion, and then I have one here that is a doc. And so you'll see that I have the Word, it kind of duplicates. And so that is one of the things that I don't love about Google Drive is if you upload it one way and then convert, you end up with two files that are very similar, but this is the Word and this is the doc. So I do tend to convert when I'm uploading just because I don't like to mess with the two formats. However, like if you have fancy formatting and you want to keep your Google, your Word format, you don't have to. So that's kind of the uploading, moving around, that type of thing. One of the things that I really do make a point of is organizing. And so like all of these files that I have uploaded, I typically would be in a folder and I would be uploading them to a folder versus just dropping them into my drive because I try to keep it as organized as possible. All right, so more questions about Drive or how that works or any of that kind of thing? You can unmute or you can just check.
I had questions about the student folders. They don't fill up in the constant email deal. They talked about it a number of times and I just wasn't catching what they were saying.
All right, so ask me that question again.
There was a lot of talk about making the student folders so they don't fill up and jam up your email. I haven't used like shared student folders or anything before, so it was just confusing. But I kept seeing it pop up over and over.
Okay, so with Google Classroom, one of the things that I like about Google Classroom is the folder structure is automatically created for you. And so if I'm looking at my Google Classroom and I look at my classwork, at the top of the page, I have this class drive folder. And so here, every assignment that I've made for your class has a folder in it. And so I can go in and I can look at using Google Drive, and here's a couple of attachments that people have created and sent to me. So I can go in and I can see that. Excuse me. So it's going to automatically do that for me. If where the email comes into play is in your notifications. And so when we go over here to your main menu and down to your settings, here, you do most likely want to get notifications. Like right now, if you have your notifications on for this class, you should be getting notifications when I send you, when I post work, etc., etc. Here, you can get notifications for classes of, late student work, resubmission of student work, co-teaching classes, or scheduling if a scheduled post publishes or fails to publish. And you can turn this on or off depending on the class that you want. And so I would really, I have too many notifications turned on, and I know that. And so like in my inbox, it is somewhat out of control just because I've that's just it's just how they come in. And so every time I get a comment, I get a notification over here. So does that help answer that question in terms of your inbox?
Some, yes.
Okay. But in terms of like students folders, you should, the student files go here, and then they should also, if I switch over to me as a student, so I'm switching to me as a student, I too have a folder in Google Drive. So if I'm looking at my classwork and I look at my folder, I have a folder for this class in Google Drive, and these are all the files that I have created or used for this class so far this year. And this is where you can tell students to go to their folder, and this is why, using, being able to say an assignment number or, be really specific can help your learners find what they're looking for in terms of assignments, and they can say, oh yeah, it's here, I must not have turned it in, or, that type of thing. All right, Katie, excellent question. How do you give your K-12 email access to all of your Google Drive stuff that you created under your Gmail? So that is, you can do that at multiple levels. Do I use the hashtag much? You can. You can. That is one of the naming conventions, just because it helps. It just gives you that uniqueness. You're not going to find hashtag 001 anywhere else unless you use it multiple times. So let's talk to sharing in my Drive. So I am in my personal drive, or one of my other work drives. And so I can go down and I can find a file, something that I don't typically have shared. So like this whole folder of stuff, I can share this whole folder with me at K-12. And so I can click on the drop down, I can share, and then I can say add people or groups, and I'm gonna say me at K-12. I'm going to make myself an editor here, and then I'm going to send it over. It's going to ask if I want to share. So when you do your Gmail, you're not going to get this kind of question, but if you're sharing between organizations, it's going to say. And so when you're sharing something from your K-12 to your personal, you're going to get this message. And most of the time, this is fine. It's not a big deal. Okay, so now I'm going to pop back over to me as a teacher. I'm going to go back to my drive. And where would I look? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Where would I look to find this file that I just found, that I just shared with me? Or you can unmute.
Shared.
Shared. Shared with me. Awesome. Super. Okay. So I'm going to click on shared with me. And one of the things that you're going to find is sometimes you have to hit refresh. It's not going to automatically pop up. And it's not, I'm in the wrong drive, I think. Oops. Here we are. Shared with me. And it definitely won't pop up if you're in the wrong drive. And here we go, conferences. And so I've shared all of the files that I have in my personal account over with me as a teacher in my K-12 account. So you can do stuff at the folder level. You can do it at the individual file level. So you can you don't it's not like you have to share every individual file. You can do it if you have them in folders. And if you want to put them in folders, it's just a drag and drop thing. It's not horrible. So that was a good question. Thank you. Other questions? About your drive and managing your drive. Okay, so moving on then, we'll go ahead and look at, so that was, I really wanted to make sure that we were pretty comfortable with the Google Drive. There are some nice resources in terms of organizing your Google Drive here, just to help you with that structure, and that does really help if you're looking at that. So let us dive into today and hanging out with quizzes and forms. So in the participants tab, I'll clear out the drag and drop thing, and we'll do a yes, no. Who's used Google Forms before? All right, it's neck and neck. Molly's used them. Molly, were you the one that used them to do kind of like a little check-in after your Zoom meetings with your students, or was that somebody else? Nope, it wasn't you. Okay, it was one of your colleagues did that, and I love that idea. All right. So right now, the no's have it, but not by very much. So you guys are almost 50-50. It's 11 to 16. So awesome. I love that. The using it to sign up for practice times. That's a really great way to use Google Forms. Anybody else want to share of the people who've used Google Forms, how you use Google Forms? You can chat, you can unmute.
Use them for assignments.
What do you mean by assignments?
They make great multiple choice assignments
Oh, okay.
that you get graded really fast.
Okay, so it's that you use the multiple choice and use the auto grade feature so that it's like magic. Oh, Holly uses it to survey staff and students. Yes. Monday, Friday check-in. Parent, and one last spring for parents. Oh, Winter, I love that you used it for parents too, because it is a really easy way to gather information. Oh, a spiral review for math. Nicole, how do you do that with them?
I just had it as a multiple choice, but then I had the math question up there. They had to work it out on their paper or whatever they had at home, and then it was just a quick check-in to see what they knew and didn't know towards the end of the year.
Okay, nice. And Jessica, you used it as task cards. Okay. I see there's so many different ways we can use Google Forms. And so when we click into the Google Forms resources here, and so we look at this assignment, I did give you guys a couple of resources to go along with this. Your activity for this is to create a form or quiz and then share the link so that your colleagues can fill it out so that you can get some results too, because if you've not used a form before, it's kind of nice to have a demo form with some results in it to see how it works. And if you have used a form before, try something new and cool. So in the Google Education Center, they give us the first day of Google Forms. And so they have a couple quick videos on finding forms, how to use questions, and then as we scroll on down, you have different some different types of resources there. So that first day has some really great things. And then ditch that textbook. I don't think he sleeps. He comes up with 25 practical ways to use Google Forms in class. And so lots of different ideas. And so if you are not sure of how you want to use Google Forms, he has so many different ideas of using Google Forms. We'll do a real quick run through of Google Forms, and so that so you can see some ins and outs. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to play around with Google Forms. So I'm going to go to my drive, and I'm just going to make a new Google form. Because I don't necessarily have to, I mean, I can have a whole collection of Google Forms, which is really nice. I don't have to just do them in Google Classroom. So I'm going to go over here and click on New, scroll on down, and get my More, and get Google Forms. Seriously, Google Forms should not be under More. It should be right there. So I'm going to create it in a shared folder, which is fine. So I'm going to say create and share. And this is what comes up as the default. So this is my untitled form. We're going to look across the top, and you can see that you have some options. We can name it. And so this is, And we'll try some different things with it. You'll notice that when I typed my title up here, it did automatically fill down here. Doesn't go the other way. Organizationally, if I think, where is this form located? I can click on this folder right here. I can move it should I want to move it somewhere else. And if I want to just open the folder that it's in, I can click on this little rectangle or square with the arrow, and it'll actually open up this folder. So now I can see where it's at in this folder, which is really nice. So just so you guys know that if you're like, you found a file and you're like, where in the world is it? That's how you can do that. This star lets me star it. So if it's something that I want to add to my starred items, I can do that. And so then I can click on my starred items and see it. As we scroll on over, I can set up a theme. I can upload a header if I want to. And so but one of the things that I find frustrating with the headers is they really don't necessarily, so I can, whoops, I can drag and drop it. Whoops, oh, there it goes. Okay, here we are. So it might look okay. So we'll say done and see what it comes up like. Ah, look at that. It doesn't look bad at all. Nice. So you can, so this is the header that you all have a copy of for your Google Classroom. You can also drag and drop it in as your header for this. So you can upload images, but just know that many times they will they won't always format correctly. Now it did some default theme colors for me based on my header. It gives me my background color. I can futz with the font style if I want. And so I have all those options for theme. And so you have a lot of control with your theme. Preview, I really do recommend using preview because then you can see how it looks and you can actually run through it yourself if you want to. You'll notice at the lower right-hand corner, we have this little pencil that gives us the option to edit this form. But the preview also opened up in a new tab, and so I can just close it and go back to my old tab. Settings. This is where all the fun is. And this is one of those things where I do encourage you guys. Oh, Jessica, yes, I have a perfect example of that. So Jessica wants to know, is it a way to display only one question at a time? Yep, totally. So in your settings, I really do encourage you guys to play around with this a little bit and see what happens with settings. Collect email addresses. I often collect email addresses because I want people to be able to, I want response receipts. What are response receipts? That is where they receive a copy of their responses in an email. I like that. I like knowing that when I fill out a form, I get the receipt, you know, and if they don't want it, they can delete it. But it's also nice to be able to say, you know, I don't remember what I filled out and be able to go back and look at it. And so you can do it if they request it or always. So that is one reason to collect email addresses. If we do a quiz, and so I'm going to pop over to the quiz tab. If I make it a quiz, you're going to see that we have to collect email addresses. And so if I make it a quiz, it will want me to connect email addresses. In your quiz options, you'll notice that you have the locked mode for Chromebooks, but it has to be a managed Chromebook. And so that is your only locked mode option. On a quiz, you can also release a grade immediately after submission or later after manual review. That is going to turn on email collection. And so there again, I would definitely have that email on. And then you can also edit what they see. So if they can see missed questions, they can see correct answers, or they can see point values. And so you can control that. So I'm going to go back. So I have collect emails on the sign in. If I say restrict to users in the state of South Dakota and its trusted organizations, that's perfect for our kids. If we really, if they're using the K-12, if they're logged into Google Classroom, they're already going to be signed in. If I'm sending it out to my parents, if I'm sending it out to some outside organization where they're not all going to be K-12, you're going to need to make sure that that sign in is unchecked. Limit to one response. There again, totally up to you if you want your students to be able to fill out this form any number of times or limit it. And then finally, edit after they submit and see summary charts. Editing after they submit means that they can go back and they can change their answers. If they use summary charts and text responses, that would be, kind of like when you vote for something in the newspaper, you can see, how other people responded. And so you wouldn't necessarily see the individual information like this is what Julie said, but you would be able to see summary charts and text responses. You wouldn't know who said it. Presentation. So presentation, you have this is really, they've changed it up quite a bit. There's a progress bar so you can see how far you are. There's the shuffle question order, which is if you have students sitting next to each other and you don't want the questions to come up. You cannot use shuffle if you are going to be doing some of the like section questions, and if they have to answer this question, and if you're doing some of the logic, shuffle doesn't work. And then you can also show another link to submit another response. And so this is great if you are like at Meet the Teacher Night and you want parents to fill out their information and you want them to do it on a Google form because it shows up on a spreadsheet. You can do that right then and there and just have it, use a device in your classroom, say go ahead and sign up. And then when somebody else does it, and then your confirmation message, thanks for your response, and I can save that. So those are my different settings that I have control over. And so now, because it is collecting email addresses, it'll automatically put this email address at the top of my form. If I don't want it to collect email addresses, I can uncheck this, save it, and then the email address goes away. But I have started collecting email addresses almost by default, just because most of the time what I want is I want that information. Okay, so now when we're looking at our forms and we've set this up as a quiz, so when I click on a question that's set up as a quiz, it's going to look a little different than if it's not set up as a quiz. You'll see I have an answer key down here. So I can click on that and it's going to show me, my answer options. So here's my first question. I can bring in a picture if I want. And so if I have a picture, so I can bring in this image, and now I can say, how many apples start with a CR? And then I can do 2, 6, 9. So I've asked a question, and I can now go back to my answer key and I can say, what's the correct answer? So my correct answer is 2. I can add answer feedback with incorrect answers. I can say, The nice thing here is I can either embed a link to something, and so if I do have a, like, go back and review, I can say, please go review. I can go back and give them a link or a YouTube video. And this is where, having access to YouTube is going to be really integral, because if you want to be able to embed in videos, you need the YouTube. So now I'm done with my answers. And so if I click on done, it's going to take me back to my question. And here I go. Oh, I forgot to put in points. Sorry. So here's my points. I can change the points up here. So now we have my first question. So at this point, I have some customization options within the form. And so one of them is I can duplicate it. And so I often create a question and then I just duplicate it. I can delete it if I don't like it. Required. Required is, I use required often for the questions that I need to have answered, and then I turn it off for the questions that are optional. Here I can do a couple of different things. The 3 dots is your best friend. You can shuffle the option order, and so if I want students to not necessarily see the 2, 6, 9 in that order, it can be varied, so that can be shuffled. I can also go to a section based on an answer. And so this is where I can start to control questions, control what happens next, et cetera, by creating sections. And so when you've asked that question about how do I keep students from moving back and forth, you can, or moving beyond, you can do that. The one question at a time, it's the sections that we want to do. And I have a really great example that I'll show you guys in a minute, and I'll actually let you guys do it so you can see how it works. Okay, so lots of really great questions. So and when I change the settings, will it change for all future forms or just this one? When you create a new form, though, if you copy this form, like you've made this form and you copy it, those settings will be there. When you come back and create a new form, you will have the default settings. And so like only the K-12 can answer that type of thing. If a parent completes a form, yes. And the responses to a form, I think, is the best part ever, because it saves in your form. You can also put it in a spreadsheet. And I'll show you guys how to link the Google form. How do you import a test from ExamView or Kia? Good question. And we can look at that in a little bit. Okay. So this is where the 3 dots, this is where we can start to do some things with sections. And so I can say go to section 1, but I haven't even put any sections in. And so this is kind of where when you are creating your form, that you may need to think about how you want your students to navigate, and you can make all your questions and then come back and think about how you want them to navigate. So let me pull up this form that I used. Okay. So this is an activity form that has a whole bunch of sections. And so you'll notice here that I have 5 sections, section 1 of 5, section 2, section 3. And so you'll see I have all these different sections. Because I did this with adults, I didn't make anything be required, which is kind of nice. So after section 1, you'll see my instructions here are continue to next section. After section 2, continue to next section. And so when I'm looking at it from the design side, it doesn't look, it looks like everything's on one page. The cool thing is, this is what it looks like when a student sees it. So here are my instructions. I have to click on next. Now I see, I give the instruction to observe, and then what do you see? If I had this be a required question, I would have to fill this out before I could click on next. Same thing. Now, and then finally, any questions. And then I can submit it. And so if I go back and look at all my responses, the nice thing about this, and I didn't collect any names or anything on this, but I gathered up all of this feedback, all of this information, through this form ahead of time. And so this is one of those things that when we're thinking about doing asynchronous and synchronous work, this is a great asynchronous activity where students can do this, this just needs to be done by Monday. And then when we have our Zoom meeting on Monday, I'll be able to, you'll be able to go in and have a discussion around this because the students have already done this reflection part. So when I'm looking at my responses, this is where I can turn it into a spreadsheet. And so I can click on the spreadsheet here. And this is already in a spreadsheet. And so, and I didn't ask people for names or anything. And so I didn't make people do any of that. But so you can see, all of the responses. One of the things with a Google form is your responses don't wrap or anything automatically. And so I tend to do the text wrapping so that it's just easier to read them. But so that is one of the nice ways to be able to, by using the sections, to be able to create, one question at a time. And so how I would probably do that, and you can do different things. So here's a question that I just dropped in. I can copy it, but you'll also see that I can add another question if I want to. So I can just click on add a question. Here it is. I can import questions, and these are going to come from forms that I have used previously. And so I can go look at, go ahead. And so here I can ask, bring in a couple of questions that I've used previously, and these are both multiple choice. And then I can also, so now if I want to, let me get rid of this blank one. So now I'm going to say, okay, I want everything to be on its own, a question on its own page. And so at that point, you want to do your sections, and your sections are your little equal sign. And so here's section 1 of 2. So now if I do another section, here's section 2 of 3. Where is my 2 of 2? Oh, here, 2 of 3 and 3 of 3. And so I can move these sections around now by grabbing them. Hypothetically, I can move these sections around by grabbing them. there we go, move it. So I can move it wherever I want it to be. I can also move my questions. And so right now I have we'll say this is the beginning. We'll do this very first question. After section 1, continue to the next section. So this is section 2, and I do not have to have a title here. I can have a title here. So I need to add a question in here. So I'll move this one up. So now I've moved this question up. So this is my state capitals. And then now, and this is a quick math. So at this point, you have to complete each section before you can see. So if we look at the preview, you're going to see that here's my first one. Say next. Oops, I need an email. Now it's going to ask me what's the capital. Okay. So I've done the form, I've rolled it in, and the nice thing here is now when I go back to my form, I can see that I have one response. I can see an analysis of my quiz to see how I did. And so I got this one right, I got this one right. Actually, this one wasn't even graded. I didn't have this set up as a quiz. And this one I got wrong. And so I can release my responses if I want to. So I can go to my individual. It tells me my score is not released. I can release this score and send emails and release. And there we go. So it looks a little bit different when you do it this way, just because you have the different sections. And so that's a really quick way to make it work. Oh, do you want to get the answer correct? Oh, super fun. Jessica, you want to do really fun things. So yes, we can make it so the answer has to be correct. I'm going to duplicate our sample form. So 3 dots, skinny snowman, make a copy. And this is going to be, I'm going to call it like a correct answer. So when we duplicate this one, I get the exact same form, no responses, et cetera, et cetera. Because you want to force the correct answer before they can move on, we can do a couple of different things. You can change the you can go in and say if they get the correct answer, you can make them go to the right the next section, or you can do that. The other thing you can do is if I make it not a quiz, I can go in and I can, let's see, do something with it. Oh, I don't want this section. Oh, you guys, I'm losing my mind. So short answer, I can require text. That's what I want. I can do response validation on short answer text. And so if I want them to say that the number equals two, Now, when I come back and do this, they're not going to be able to move on until they get the correct answer. And so when we look at our preview here, and I do my, but so this is no longer a quiz, this is just forcing the right answer. And so if I say 3, it says try again. Now it's going to let me move on. So when you're doing the fill in the blanks, you can have answer validation. And so that is one way you can do that. We can also do more of a, you can use the, if they get the right answer, you can move on to the next one. And I'm going to have to, I'll find you a tutorial for that, because that's a little more than what we're going to do today. So great questions about forms. So what we're going to do next, and so that's essentially a form. Questions about forms and what you can do with them.
Could you cover some in the quizzes with short answer and having how they would correct out and stuff?
Yes, thanks for asking that. So we'll go back to, this is my sample form, this is the quiz. I'm going to pop back over to my questions, and I'm going to add another question, and I'm going to add it at the top. Actually, added it at the bottom. All right, so we're going to do a quick short answer here. And so when we do a short answer question, or we can, So at this point, I have short answer text here. When I click over to the answer key, I can add correct answers for a short answer. This gets to be a little crazy because, you know, nobody can spell, everybody is, you know, I mean, it just gets to be a little out of control. And so what I can do with this one is I can go back. I can make it be a paragraph. And here it's going to be, I can add some feedback if I want to, you know, automatic, but this is going to be something that I'm going to have to grade on my own. And this is where you really want to make sure that you don't have the automatic grade submitted. So I'll go in and sample this guy. And remember, I had shuffle order on in here for the answers, so you'll see that it shuffled my answers. Okay. All right, so if I pop back over to my responses, now I see 2 responses. And so at this point, as I roll on down and I look at my score not released one, so this is my second one. I can add I can add points here if I want to. So I can say that I got 5 points, and I can add individual feedback. And so I can go in and answer this question for the student. This one I got wrong, and so not quite. So when I come back, I can edit that. Does that make sense? So does that help?
Some.
Okay. All right, any other questions about forms? Are the students able to open the form again to see the feedback, not just the copy of the answers emailed to them? That's a great question. Let me see if I'm gonna have to go back and look at that, because your feedback will come back in the form. So I'm gonna have to answer. I'll answer that one tomorrow. Okay. All right. Other questions or thoughts before I turn you loose with some form time?
Julie,
Yeah.
what I want to be able to know what kind of lab equipment my students are going to need. So if I give them a form that is a list of equipment and they simply check off what they need, will it compile those responses? Meaning, will it allow more than one response?
Yes. So when we play around with the forms and the different kinds of questions, so here you have short answer, paragraph. Multiple choice is one answer. Check boxes is you can check as many as you want. And so if you use check boxes with a list, you can do that. Drop down is especially on a phone, a drop down I think is a little bit harder, and so I don't tend to use the drop down, and you can only pick one answer with the drop down. But the checkbox, you can go through and do a list and just check all the answers that you want. And then another, like a checkbox grid might be useful if you wanted to, like if you need to say, you know, how many do you need of something, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, you could go that route if you're asking those kinds of questions. You can do a checkbox grid. So the check boxes, you can do as many as you want, multiple choice, and are one answer per. Okay. All right, any other questions? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to go through and make a form and actually share it. So make sure that either anybody on the K-12 can access it or anybody can access it into the class comments, so that you'll actually get some data to play around with. And so it can be a form or it can be a quiz, but I do want you to be able to see that so that you can see how it works to turn it into a spreadsheet and, you know, some of those kinds of things. So we'll just do a real quick, I mean, this doesn't need to be a rocket science form. Try something you haven't tried before. Just test it out. But I do want you to make sure that you can do a form, because it makes life so much easier when you can use forms to gather data rather than doing it manually. So I will be here. I'll watch the chat. You can unmute and ask questions. And so we'll come back at the top of the hour. And so I encourage you guys to go in and check out your forms. And so both LaDonna and Trey shared forms already, and I went in and took their quizzes. So do one of you guys want to share your screen and show us the results and see how that looks, LaDonna or Trey?
Would you mind going over how to share it again?
Your screen or the form?
The form.
Sure. So when we are in a form, and this gets me every time, the send is how you share your form. And so I always think, I don't want to send it to anybody, I want to share it. Well, that's how you do it. So you can send via email. I generally do with the link. You can click on the link shortener and it'll make it a little bit shorter. You can copy it. And then you can also embed it. And so if you are going to want to put it in a website or something like that, you can get the embed code for it. But so that's how it's send form, and then go ahead and send it over.
Julie, you have screen sharing disabled by participants?
I do, yes. I'll stop sharing. I'll let you share.
Okay.
I just, all the Zoom bombing, you just never know. Until I invite you to share, I feel more comfortable. So,
No,
all
I know
right.
what you mean, because I was actually in one that we did get bombed.
It's hard because we work with such diverse groups, and you guys have renamed yourselves really well, which is awesome, but not everybody does, and so you never really know. Awesome. Okay, so you're sharing your screen with us, and there's your survey. And do you want to talk about your survey at all?
No, it's just what I would use at the end of ancient Greece with comparing Sparta and Athens,
Okay.
and to which one they would want to be in. And it's always funny because most of the time the girls will pick Sparta instead of Athens.
That is interesting. So I noticed that you gathered not only your email addresses, you're collecting email addresses, you also got their name.
That's something I've learned over the years. I always want both, because their school emails would be like LM, I think mine's LM215. It's much easier to sort it later by name. And then even if they screw around and put somebody else's name, you still have their email.
Okay. That's a good, and that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because adding in the name can really make a big difference. Okay, so go ahead and let's look at your responses, because I took your quiz, and so we can see your responses.
No, I guess I could have gone to Classroom to get it.
That's okay. All right. Oh, look, you have 2 responses. Awesome. Okay. And so how are you going to, do you want to grade them, or because they were fill in the blank?
Usually when I do that, I just go right through and grade within Google Classroom, or go
Okay.
here and go by question.
Okay.
Does this allow you to grade by
You're muted. I'm not sure. Does it allow you to do what?
grade?
You're still muted.
Can you grade by question rather than by student? Meaning, can I look at all question 1?
Deb, that's what I did when you go into your form.
Mm-hmm.
Up to your responses, and then I always go by questions, so that way I don't even know what kid wrote anything.
Okay, thank you.
And that is kind of nice to have that option. And then the one thing I do know, that you have to save your edits here, which is somewhat, most of the things we do, we don't have to save anymore because they auto save. And so just know if you make those changes, you have to save. Awesome. Thanks for sharing with us, LaDonna. Any
Yep.
other questions about LaDonna's quiz? All right, let's see, who else has shared? Has anybody else shared? I'm getting lots of them. Ooh, lots and lots. Does anybody else want to bring theirs up and talk about it?
No.
No. I do want to look at, ooh, Jessica. Oh, I love this. Can I share yours, Jessica?
Sure.
Okay.